Hi everyone, this is Dr. Anamta and I am your UPSC English Literature faculty. And today we are doing a very important lesson. We recently finished our series of Renaissance. हम लोग ने पढ़ा था closure तक 1642 तक, when the drama, the theatre completely closed down because of the Puritan rule and how Oliver Cromwell came to the throne. But now we are going to talk about restoration, that is from 1660 and onwards. Okay, so restoration मतलब क्या होता है? Restore करना, मतलब जो पहले चीज थी वो वापस आ जाना. So Oliver Cromwell was finally executed. He was killed in 1659 and 1660 में Charles II came. Charles II, who was the son of Charles I, and Charles I was also killed by Oliver Cromwell. And so Charles II ran to France because he was threatened that he would also be killed. So the son went to France, and then when the restoration with the monarchy came back, जब ओलिवर क्रॉमवेल ने अपना प्योरिटन रूल उनका खत्म हो गया, तो जब चार्ल्स II वापस आए तो monarchy came back, and that is known as a restoration. Okay, so Charles II was the one to bring the monarchy back to England, and restoration came along in 1660. Okay, so that is then known as a restoration period. This series that we are going to begin, this is going to be the first part of the Restoration to Romanticism series, that is part 1, and I'll just mention it over here, part 1. This is part 1, and we will be looking at different periods and aspects also. So just going ahead, let's move ahead to our lesson, the first part of the Restoration to Romanticism. Context and conditions of the Restoration. So you can look at this, monarchy is coming back. You can look at the Britain flag that is flying up high. So over here, we are coming to context and conditions of the Restoration 1660 to 1700. So we are looking at the 40 years period firstly, okay, and then we'll eventually move. The Restoration, that is 1660, replaced rather than simply restored. So what did it replace? Puritan rule आ गया था Oliver Cromwell का, लेकिन उसको it was completely removed, and then monarchy returned with Charles II, but now largely powerless. So yes, there is a slight change to the monarchy. Monarchy आ तो गई थी, लेकिन काफी पावर अब monarchy के पास नहीं रहा था. Why? Because parliament strong हो गया था, ministers आ गए थे. So this with the strengthening of the parliament, of course, the powers of the monarchy reduced. So yes, restoration में Charles II monarchy तो लेके आ गए थे, लेकिन yes, उनके पास इतनी powers नहीं थे जो once upon a time, the kings and the monarchs used to enjoy. Now parliament gained dominance, leading to the emergence of Whigs and Tories. Now we know that दो parties emerge हो गई थी, Whigs and Tories. Whigs were in full support of the parliament and Tories were very much inclined towards the monarchy. Okay, so ये दोनों parties आ गई थी, Whigs and Tories, that emerged around 1666, 70s में emerge हो गया था. Then power shifted to the prime minister and parliamentary system, ensuring social stability. So parliamentary system, prime minister became more important. However, still there was this monarchy which used to enjoy that, that royalty, and still they were very proud that they have a king with them. Okay, but yes, power itni nahi thi unke paas. Then what we can see, intellectual and cultural shift. Now Renaissance values of speculation, जो Renaissance की values थी to speculate, explore करना, curiosity जो थी Renaissance की, exploration ideas जो थे, they were all replaced by reason and facts. Now everything was it has to be reasoned out, it has to be factual. Everything was studied in that manner. So the glorious revolution of 1688, अगर हम लोग बाद में देखें, Charles II के बाद जो monarch आए थे, that was James II, 1685 में. Now this is a very interesting point over here. James II, when he came in 1685, he was a Catholic. Now Catholic leader, Protestant, land नहीं जमेगा, right? नहीं हो पाएगा. So a lot of people were completely against it. Within 3 years, he was completely replaced. उनको overthrow कर दिया गया था. Glorious revolution आया था. So that is named as Glorious Revolution in 1688. This interesting thing about these white people are कि हम लोग हमेशा अपने कोई भी खराब चीज को ना बड़ा अच्छा नाम दे देंगे. Okay, so revolution was of course must be bad because a Catholic leader को overthrow कर रहे थे, and they named it Glorious Revolution. Anyway, so 1688 is the year where James II was overthrown because he was a Catholic leader. Protestant citizens were not accepting him. This 1688 further reduced the parliamentarian, further reduced the monarchy powers or parliamentarian की powers और increase हो गई थी. So this peacefully replaced James II, ensuring Protestant stability. They were like, no, we cannot accept, we need a Protestant leader. Now society became middle class, commercial and institution focused. Now society was developing, it was becoming more commercialized, merchants were coming, business minded, and things were more with how the parliamentarian settings were happening. So now key institutions that were founded. This is important, guys. What were the key institutions that were founded during that time? So 1662, if we just look at 2 years after the Restoration, when Charles II came, Royal Society that promoted scientific research and discovery. This was a very important moot point during that era, that yes, this did come. The Bank of England, 1694, strengthened economic and financial stability. Okay, so these 2 points are very important. Then you have Thomas Hobbes का Leviathan, 1651 में, and its influence. So Thomas Hobbes का कौन सा आया था? Leviathan एक work आया था. What was Leviathan about? Written during Hobbes' exile in Paris, it reflected concerns about societal collapse, allegory of society as a Leviathan, a strong state needed to control selfish human nature. So again, we can see that things are moving towards more reason, more rational aspect of human nature rather than any kind of discovery, exploration. So that spirit of Renaissance was being replaced by the ideas of reason, human nature. Usko analyze karna, dekhna. So describes a lawless state of war as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, and advocates for a powerful government to ensure stability. So Leviathan was basically, you can say, a political work wherein Thomas Hobbes talked about that how England needs a more powerful government and more stability. Okay, so this was Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. You can just look at the picture also over here. Thomas Hobbes is sitting and writing Leviathan. Okay, next, moving ahead. Significant. This was marked a major transformation in English government thought side. So Leviathan, why is Leviathan so important by Thomas Hobbes? Why? Because this marked a very major transformation in English governance, thought and society. This set the stage. This work set the stage for 2 centuries of political stability, commerce and scientific progress. This is the reason Thomas Hobbes becomes so important. Thomas Hobbes' ideas influence modern political philosophy, justifying a strong central authority that yes, it makes it a very enriching work in bringing stability, political stability within England. Okay, moving ahead, you have from the Restoration, if you look at to the 18th century, religion, literature and political stability. If we are going to look at these important aspects, so from the Restoration to the 18th century, so around 1798, you can look at that, and from the Restoration to till the time that Romantic era began. Now let us look at the Restoration period first. Hobbes and the binary of passion. Now continuing with the idea of Hobbes ने अपने Leviathan work में जो 1651 में लिखा गया था, that influence Augustan thought, emphasizing passion leads to conflict and instability. Reason leads to peace and social order. The laws of nature, articles of peace are necessary for civil harmony. No, Leviathan was the one who was propagating the idea of reason, peace, and social and political and social order, and passion leads to conflict and stability. Therefore, giving to reason, logic, law and order. All these ideas were being promoted by Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan. This is the reason that when you look at the poetry, when you look at even the plays of that era, it is all based on reason. It is all based on order, on decorum. Look at the work of John Dryden. Look at the work of Alexander Pope. Even the poetry that they were writing was in very order. Heroic couplet होना चाहिए, iambic pentameter होना चाहिए, इस तरह लिखना चाहिए. Does not need to be very passionate. It has to be more according to the classical writers like Virgil है and Horace है, उनकी तरह लिखना चाहिए. So this idea was brought in by whom? By Thomas Hobbes, that it should be more on logic, more reason, more law, decorum rather than anything else. आप imagination नहीं, इतना imagination मत लाओ, इतना passion मत लाओ. law law, order law, हर चीज में, अब work में, politics में, in everything. So this was the reason that Thomas Hobbes' work got so promoted and propagated. So now religious stability and paradise lost. Now post Commonwealth England, that is post Commonwealth मतलब Oliver Cromwell के era के बाद का जो England था, that saw a return to religious tradition and Protestant supremacy. So अब हमें पता है कि Protestant supremacy बहुत बढ़ गई थी. Charles II was also Protestant. 1688 में जब Glorious Revolution हुआ था, जब silently overthrow कर दिया गया था James II को, now that actually emphasized and categorically stated that yes, Protestant rule ही रहेगा. So Milton के Paradise Lost जो 1667 में आई थी was interpreted in strictly religious terms. Instead of Renaissance idea of free will and freedom, it was read as a justification of God's supremacy. Okay, so it was read that Paradise Lost is a simple story. It's a biblical story जो है, and that is that, you know, how God was the one to send Adam and Eve on this earth, and how Adam and Eve were corrupted by Satan. However, the supremacy of God is very, very validated in the entire text. So yes, supremacy of God was kind of considered the final word, and Milton के Paradise Lost ने बहुत propagate किया. The text aligned with the authorized version of the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer. Okay, so authorized version of the Bible, I've discussed this. 1611 में James the second, yes, James the II was the one who brought it. Okay, so John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress became another foundational religious text of that era. And this, so Milton's Paradise Lost and John Bunyan's The Pilgrim Progress were the one who that were considered the most religious works of that period. Now we are moving ahead to the second one. Economic and literary transformation, 18th and century, rise of the middle class and industrial growth. Now industrialization was coming. So there will of course be rise of whom? The middle class. Okay, so the rise of the middle class, industrial growth, parallel to early industrial and agrarian revolutions, there was shift towards urban commerce and economic pragmatism. So yes, economic pragmality आ रही थी, लोगों को पैसा कमाना था, they were becoming more pragmatic, and they were of course moving towards industrialization. So yes, middle class was getting power. There were merchants who were rising, middle class who was emerging to be an elite class, a higher class, because of the money that they started possessing. So this became a very important aspect. Key literary trends, अगर हम लोग अब literary trends की बात करें, what were the literary trends that were rising? We saw that yes, Renaissance era में तो poetry ने dominate किया था, and किया था किसने dominate? That was poetry and drama. But in this one, in key literary trends, there was rise of the novel as a popular but critically undervalued genre. Novel rise कर रहा था, but इतना ज़्यादा उसका promotion नहीं था. Nobody was giving it much attention the way drama and poetry was getting attention. Growth of journalism. This is a very important point. Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, there were such writers, there were such journalists who were propagating journalism, and magazines' emergence of professional authorship. Increase in literary criticism, defining what was acceptable literature. So, you know, interestingly, these journals, these newspapers were also bringing literary critical work. And वही लोग बताते कि ये अच्छा है, ये नहीं अच्छा है, इसको पढ़ना चाहिए, इसको नहीं पढ़ना चाहिए. जोसेफ एडिसन ने स्पेक्टेटर में मिल्टन के पैराडाइज लॉस्ट को बहुत जगह दी थी, बहुत ही अच्छे तरीके से इसको इवैल्यूएट किया था. सो वी कैन सी दैट यस, लिटरेरी क्रिटिसिज्म वाज आल्सो इंक्रीजिंग थैंक्स टू द जर्नलिज्म ऑफ दैट पीरियड. Now, poetry shifted away from Augustan neoclassicism, embracing funeral themes and simpler words. धीरे धीरे, अभी तो हम लोग पढ़ेंगे कि पोइट्री क्या थी. तो उस टाइम पे जो पोइट्री थी रेस्टोरेशन पीरियड में, बहुत ही ऑर्डर, डेकोरम, बहुत ही ज़्यादा फिक्स्ड आइडियाज़ के साथ चलती थी. एंड देन देयर यूज्ड टू बी अ लॉट ऑफ रीजन एंड प्रैक्टिकलिटी टू द वर्क्स, टू द पोइट्री. बट धीरे धीरे व्हेन वी सी people were tired of the decorum in the language, the stability of the verses. They were like, we need something flowy, we need something that's natural. तब ये आया था, तब न्यू क्लासिज्म का एरा ख़त्म होके so a funeral themes and simpler language themes started coming, and this then later shifted to romantic era. We will study that later. Now late 18th century saw a fascination with the exotic, the supernatural and the primitive also. So काफ़ी चीज़ें आ गई, supernatural themes आ गई थी, primitive themes. So all these themes started rising. So कैसे देखते हैं, reason, law, decorum से आगे बढ़ रहा था, and things were moving ahead in a different manner. Now moving ahead. So now the fear of revolution. Now Restoration England sought to erase the memory of past revolutions. So yes, Cromwell's Commonwealth and the Glorious Revolution removed Catholic James II without bloodshed in England. So there were many revolutions. We saw कि किस तरह से 1649 में चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट को मारा गया था, फिर 1659 में ओलिवर क्रॉमवेल को मारा गया था, फिर 1688 में जेम्स द फर्स्ट को निकाल दिया गया था. So there was a lot of revolutions that were happening and people were like, कितनी revolutions होंगे? Are we prepared for the next one? So the Glorious Revolution, this happened. Now we see that Bonnie Prince Charlie and the Stuart Rebellion. So two failed uprising happened. So 1715 and 1745 attempted to restore the Stuart monarchy, but this failed. And Battle of Culloden, May 1746 ended the Stuart claim to the throne permanently. So जो revolutions बाद में हुए हैं काफी fail हुए हैं. But because they were like, kitni revolutions honge? We need to cut down, otherwise every decade or 2 decades, there's something that's huge that's going to happen. So Bonnie Prince Charlie wanted to go ahead with the Stuart line. Okay, दूसरी line आ गई थी, तो Stuart dynasty को continue करना चाह रहे थे, but उसको curtail कर दिया गया. Battle of Culloden, maybe 1746 में ended the Stuart claim to the complete. Stuart claim को completely eradicate कर दिया था. अब कोई उनका chance नहीं था monarchy पे आने का. Okay, so this happened. Then moving ahead, you have 18th century British society's anti-revolution sentiment. Now Britain resisted the American Revolution as well. So when we look at that, 18th century British society का anti-revolution sentiment. So this anti-revolution sentiment कि अब और revolutions नहीं होने चाहिए, that exceeded. They had seen so many revolutions that they were like, now we are not going to let any revolution happen. So Britain resisted the American Revolution. That was 1776 में जब अमेरिका को आज़ादी मिली है, they resisted that. And the French Revolution also 1789. Britain was like, no, we are not going to let this happen. So now England was getting a huge level of national pride. The identity that they were that they are one of the best nations in the Europe. So this was giving them a huge level of pride within themselves. So the national pride grew, with Britain seeing itself as the land of liberty and political stability. And what happened? Expansion of the British Empire fueled a growing sense of national self-confidence. Now we see that British colonization was happening, British imperialism was happening in every nook and corner of the world, be it in the East or be it anywhere, even America. So everything was happening in a very, very, everything was in favor of England, and they were getting huge pride in this. They were extremely happy, they were extremely self-confident. बहुत ज़्यादा इनका बढ़ गया था that that we are the best. And this was kind of, they knew that they can rule anything. At that time, England was another level of, you can say, great pride. Okay, so significance, Hobbesian political thought. So Thomas Hobbes का Leviathan जो पढ़ा था, जिसके political thought था, the Protestant dominance. So look at all these ideas. Hobbesian political thought, that was basically law, order, and stability. Protestant dominance and economic growth shaped the British identity of that time, and this is the reason that they became so highly confident about themselves. Literary shifts reflected political stability, with reason replacing speculation. There were fear of revolution shaped policies and attitudes for over a century. So there hardly any revolution happened, because they were like, enough of revolution, we cannot let anything happen. And these were the ideas that were very, very promoted during that time. Then you have John Milton, the last great liberal thinker of the English Renaissance. If we talk about the last star of the Renaissance, John Milton ko bola jata, the last star of the Renaissance, the last liberal thinker of the Renaissance, that was John Milton. So if we talk about that, so Milton's complex reputation. So Milton was basically actually a very complex figure at that time. Why? Because as a political opportunist, advocate of divorce, and an over serious classicist. So yes, बहुत strong classicist था, Latin और Greek mythology पे बहुत ज़्यादा लिखता था. If like my paid students will relate with them, लोगों ने Paradise Lost पूरा पढ़ा है, उसका book 1, book 2, book 4 and book 9. We can see replete, like the Paradise Lost is replete with Greek mythology, with classical allusions and so many ideas. Okay, so yes, political opportunist. Why? Because जब ओलिवर क्रॉमवेल था तो वो ओलिवर क्रॉमवेल को बहुत सपोर्ट करता था. जब चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट आया तो चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट को सपोर्ट करने लगा. So at that time, loyalties did shift. Not a big deal, but so he also advocated of divorce and an over-serious classicist. He believed in his own poetic greatness, often regarded as arrogant. Yes, he really believed that he's very genius, and that was considered regarded as arrogant. Despite criticism, he was a defender of tolerance, freedom, and self-determination. So, however, he very much propagated the idea of tolerance, freedom, and self-determination. Okay, so Milton was this. Then you have influence of classical and modern thought. Now, his studies were classically based, but his ideas were intellectually modern. Okay, so yes, uske jo ideas they were very, very modern. Even if you read Paradise Lost, you will realize usne Satan ko ek alag sa avatar diya hai. Okay, so that's a very different thing. So it was very, very intellectually modern. Classical tha, classical works ko follow karta tha, but intellectually it was pretty modern. He traveled to Italy and met Galileo, the scientist Galileo, condemned as a heretic for his heliocentric view. So yes, he was condemned. He was kind of, he did not enjoy a very good reputation during that period. However, he's venerated now a lot. So that was your Milton. Talking about Milton, because Milton is the last star of the Renaissance living in the Restoration, this is the reason that he becomes all the more important. And of course, Paradise Lost is one of the most important religious epic. You can say it's a literary epic. Okay, so literary epic. And so it's one of the most important works. So this is the reason Paradise Lost becomes very important, and Milton so. So early poetry, 1620s and 1630s, El Allegro and Il Penseroso. ये इसकी जो poetry, early poetry लिखी है. This contrasts carefree versus studious lifestyle. And he also, guys, he was blind. When he wrote Paradise Lost, he has written Paradise Lost in 12 books. And he's dictated the books to his nieces. He was blind during the time. उसने अपने blindness पे भी बहुत work लिखा है. He has talked about on his blindness in a poem. So famous sonnet है, 14 lines का poem है. Famous sonnet about patience and food, ending with the lines, they also serve who stand and wait. Okay, so this is a very profoundly, a very powerful line of resilience. They also serve who stand and wait. It's a very famous line on his blindness. Blindness के बारे में Milton के. So now let's come to Milton's Lycidas. Lycidas, written in 1637. It's a pastoral elegy. Okay, now it's a masterpiece of English elegy, highly venerated. बहुत इसको, poets have looked up to pastoral elegy, Lycidas pastoral elegy, and written along this way only. What is pastoral elegy? Elegy, which is elegy, of course, we know is written after the death of some person, and pastoral elegy is when you talk about the village life. Sometimes like you show shepherds and peasants in the elegy, and talking about a more simple life. That's pastoral elegy, coming from the word like pastures. Okay, so mourns his Cambridge friend. Lycidas किसके बारे में? Pastoral elegy है, एक poem है on the death of his friend Edward King, who was lost at sea, who drowned at the sea. And he moves from personal grief to universal reflections on mortality and ambition, ends with hope and renewal, concluding tomorrow to fresh woods and pictures new. Okay, so this you can imagine Lycidas over here. Then you have significance. Milton merged Renaissance humanism with emerging Enlightenment ideals. This is the significance कि जैसे जैसे Renaissance, जो last of the Renaissance था, उसने Enlightenment ideals जो कि आ रहा था, उसके साथ बड़ा अच्छे से amalgamate किया. And his works embody freedom, intellect, and poetic innovation. Lycidas remains one of the most quoted elegies in English literature. So this is a fact, guys, quoted by this works, of course, has been taken, or these notes from Doctor's History of Literature, and that is saying that Lycidas is still one of the most quoted elegies in English literature. Now, Milton's political and social engagement, if we look at that, unlike many poets of his time, John Milton was deeply involved in political and social debates. Okay, yes, he was highly politically charged, socially also present everywhere, politically also अपने हमेशा कुछ ना कुछ बोलता रहता था, लिखता रहता था, ideas बताता रहता था अपने. His writings, that is between 1640 to 1660, they address major issues, and he sided with whom? The Puritans. He sided with Oliver Cromwell. Okay, so religious reforms इसने बहुत अच्छे major issues address किए. For instance, of reformation in England in 1641. इसका एक इसने ये लिखा है वर्क. डाइवोर्स में इसने 4 पैम्फलेट्स लिखे एडवोकेटिंग दैट यस डाइवोर्स शुड बी फ्रीली अलाउड. फिर से एजुकेशन पे लिखा है एंड फ्रीडम ऑफ द प्रेस. ही हैड अ प्रॉब्लम कि फ्रीडम को कंट्रोल नहीं करना चाहिए बिकॉज चार्ल्स द फर्स्ट ने फ्रीडम को प्रेस को कंट्रोल किया था. तो मिल्टन ने एरियोपेजिटिका उनका एक इंपॉर्टेंट वर्क है दैट टॉक्स अबाउट फ्रीडम ऑफ द प्रेस. 1644 में लिखा था दैट प्लीज डू नॉट लेट the press be in your control, let the freedom of speech just be out there. Okay, so this was one of the most basic aspects of Milton's work. Then moving ahead, Arithmetica. So this is an important work and let's discuss a little bit more about this. Written in 1644, and this was defense of free speech, argues that virtue and knowledge arise from exposure to both good and evil. He's like, let the press be free, let the speech of expression of speech be free, and you know, whatever, from exposure to both good and evil, अच्छा भी लिखा जाएगा, बुरा भी लिखा जाएगा, let people decide for themselves. So censorship prevents true understanding as wisdom comes from confronting vice. Famous passage क्या है? Better to read all manner of books and hear all manner of reason. He's like, let them decide for themselves what is good and what is evil. Let them read, okay? So let the thoughts and ideas circulate. Then you have, and that was Milton and the Revolution. Now, after Charles the First execution, so Milton को, you know, Milton got a lot of political उसको position भी मिला था. जो Milton, after Charles First execution, what happened in 1649? As I mentioned, Oliver Cromwell and Charles I को, he killed Charles I. Milton argued that people had the natural right to overthrow a tyrant. So yes, वो Oliver Cromwell के साथ उसने बोला Charles I tyrant था, सही हुआ. अगर उसको मारा गया, Oliver Cromwell ने मारा तो बिल्कुल सही मारा. Now at the Restoration 1660 में, उसके बाद जब Charles II आए, क्योंकि Oliver Cromwell का रूल तो काफ़ी कम टाइम चला था ना, 10, 11, 12 साल चला था, ज़्यादा लंबा नहीं चला था. उसके बाद जब रेस्टोरेशन आया, जब चार्ल्स II फिर से वापस आए, फिर से monarchy आए, Milton was arrested and fined but spared execution. So you know, Milton was very extremely you know, in for Oliver Cromwell, very much in favor of the Puritan Commonwealth. But उसके बाद जिसने इतना लिखा था कि जब 1660 में जब वापस चार्ल्स II आए, he said that this man needs to be beheaded. But somehow because इसके इतने contacts थे, sources थे, उसको बच गया था, वो उसको नहीं मारा गया था. But yes, Milton was very much against you know, a monarchy during the Oliver Cromwell period. Now Paradise Lost. अब Paradise Lost पे आते 1667 में इसकी 10 बुक्स आई थी guys. Okay, फिर इसने 1674 में इसने जो है इन 10 बुक्स में 2 बुक्स और ऐड कर दी थी. तो पैराडाइज लॉस्ट 1667 में 10 बुक्स आई थी, 1674 में +2 करके 12 बुक्स आ गई थी. एंड this was the last great Renaissance epic. Over here you can look at what it is written, Paradise Lost, the last great Renaissance epic dictated to his third wife after going blind. Some say that it was dedicated to his nieces, some say it was dedicated to his wife. So whatever it is, but yes, it was dictated, and it was dictated because he was blind. So बहुत बड़ी बात है guys, अपने खुद से लिखना, dictate करना. It was a huge, he was actually a genius. Milton was an absolute genius. If you read about Milton, you will get to know that he knew so much of Latin, Greek from such a young age that you will realize the depth of his knowledge. So originally he was considered writing an Arthurian epic, but then what did he choose? The fall of man. That how Adam and Eve, they disobeyed God, they ate the forbidden fruit, influenced by Satan, and कैसे उनका fall हुआ. The entire Paradise Lost is about this small theme, but जिस तरह से उसने लिखा गया, that's worth reading. Okay, a grand analysis of freedom, free will, and divine justice. Purpose क्या था? To assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. Okay, over here you can look at the picture also. That is Paradise Lost का थोड़ा सा reflection आ रहा है इसमें. Then you have Satan. Satan, in fact, so Paradise Lost में बहुत discussion अभी जब मैंने paid class में अपने बच्चों को पढ़ाया था Paradise Lost, so the students, we really discuss about that how Satan is kind of considered not as a villain. Satan को उसने एक अलग ही light में दिखाया गया है. So Satan is the hero or the villain? Now this is the question that a lot of writers and critics have argued. So romantic poets like Blake, Shelley, they saw Satan as the true hero of the Paradise Lost. They said that Milton ने तो Satan को hero बना दिया गया है. Okay, so symbolizing rebellion and freedom. Why? Because Satan all wanted was rebellion. He was a rebellion, a figure, and he wanted freedom. Now Satan's famous declaration of independence: better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Now this is a very famous line. उसने बगावत की थी, उसने rebellion किया था ना God के खिलाफ. How did Satan become Satan? So Satan was basically an angel, Lucifer, and वो God का बहुत ही चहीता angel था, बहुत ही ज़्यादा God used to love him a lot. But he said that I also want to have that position of prestige and power that God enjoys. So why can't I be God? उसने rebellion किया. He said that I want to be in God's place, and उसने rebellion किया. But he had no idea of the limitless power of God. All right, so the Almighty kind of made Satan lose the battle, not kill. Satan lose the battle, and he was thrown in pandemonium in hell. And that is where the entire Paradise Lost starts. And he is shown as a very rebellious figure, somebody who wants freedom. Now the fall as loss and gain. Now जो Eve, coming back to Adam and Eve, तो जो Eve forbidden fruit खाती हैं, Eve as sins leads to humanity's suffering, but also its future on earth. Final optimistic lines, but इसके optimistic lines, उसकी end होता है Paradise Lost with optimistic lines, because God tells them that yes, Jesus Christ will come and redeem humanity. Okay, so the world was all before them where to choose their place of rest and providence their guide. Okay, so this kind of is Paradise Lost. Then significance of Milton's work. The last major poet of the English Renaissance that bridges the gap to Enlightenment thought, and his works redefine liberty, political freedom, and human struggle, as we just discussed. And Paradise Lost still remains a very important cornerstone of English literature, जो कि blend करता है religion, theology, philosophy, and epic poetry. Okay, so it brings all these elements back. Now moving ahead, you have a shift in Milton's heroic division, different from Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost explores human struggle. Okay, so we know that Paradise Lost क्या explore करता है? Human struggle, Adam and Eve का, and the interplay between God, man, and Satan. Okay, किस तरह से इन लोग का interplay होता है. Then you have Samson Agonistes and Paradise Lost. Samson Agonistes एक और work है Milton का जो 1674. I'll just write the date. 1674 में लिखा गया है. Samson Agonistes and Paradise Lost. This presents superhuman idealized hero Samson and Christ. And key difference: Adam and Eve embody human frailty. Samson and Christ जो होते हैं, they are beyond human, and they represent moral ideas, not human experience. And the times lack human identification, resembling medieval and morality plays. Okay, so this again becomes an important work. So moving ahead, Samson Agonistes, a tragic verse drama. So talking about Samson Agonistes, कौन सा जो work था? This was either 1671 or 1674. I think it was 1671. So let us look at what this play was about. So Samson Agonistes, a tragic verse drama. This follows Samson's fall. A character है Samson, उसका fall होता है. Suffering and ultimate redemption. Blindness as a personal and poetic theme. So Milton mirrors his own blindness and political downfall through Samson. So Samson is also blind. So as I told you that Milton ने अपनी blindness को कई जगह portray किया. So Samson also, he has shown his blindness. And most famous lines on blindness: eyeless in Gaza, at the mill with slaves. Oh, dark, 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 amid the blaze of noon, irrecoverably dark, total eclipse without all hope of day. Okay, so that's a very poignant lines by Milton on his own blindness that is also told in Samson Agonistes. Then final scene. What is the final scene of Samson Agonistes? You can look at the blindfold that Samson has over here. That is Samson character. Okay, so over here, final scene, Samson's strength returns. pulls down. So end में क्या होता है that he pulls down the Philistines. He pulls down the Philistines temple, destroying his enemies in a sacrificial act. Okay, so he's basically sacrificing himself also, but he's also pulling down the Philistines. Symbolism: a journey from darkness to light, despair to resolution. The last words reflect calm and acceptance, and the last words are, and calm of mind, all passion spent. ये बड़ी important lines हैं, काफी पूछते भी एग्जाम्स में इसके बारे में. So this is the last line of Samson Agonistes. Then you have paradise regained. Now he also wrote paradise regained. एक लगता है paradise lost. Then he wrote paradise regained in around 1670s, early 1670s. And this was about the victory of Christ. Why? Satan tried to tempt Christ also, but Christ did not give in. And that is a victory of Christ, and that is paradise regained. So this was a sequel to Paradise Lost, retelling Christ's resistance to Satan's temptation. Contrast with Paradise Lost, Satan, once a seductive anti-hero, is now completely defeated, and Christ's rejection of temptation is absolutely unwavering. So Christ does not give in to any temptation of Satan, and this is the reason that paradise was regained and Christ won against Satan. Milton ki final legacy: a more rigid moralistic vision in his later works. He moves from human complexity to absolute divine virtue, and he's seen as reflecting Milton's disillusionment with lost political ideas. Okay, so over here, then you have, moving ahead to John Bunyan, guys. Now we're moving ahead to another writer. So Milton, considered as the last star of the Renaissance, but there were ideals of restoration era की जो उसके ideologies थी वो भी थी. Now we are moving to John Bunyan. Now John Bunyan is considered as one of the most religious writer because उन्होंने बहुत ऐसा moral work लिखा है, and he is very popular. He still is very popular in England. So now talking about John Bunyan का जो work था, The Pilgrim's Progress, written around 1678 to 1684, a return to pre-Renaissance allegory, a literary phenomena. This is the most widely read English text for over 2 centuries and second only to the Bible. इतना ज़्यादा important है. So इसमें biblical undertones, overtones दोनों हैं. इसमें बहुत didactic है, moralistic है. This is the reason it is very, very widely read. And this uses pre-Renaissance forms, moral fable, allegory. Okay, allegory जहाँ पे जैसे कि vices है या virtues है, beauty, patience, kindness, friendship, इन सबको character का form दिया है. Okay, that's allegory. So dream, vision, narrative भी है. And this replaces Renaissance transience with a clear earth, heaven, hell structure, unquestioned moral order. So this is, very moralistic, as I mentioned. Over here you can look at John Bunyan writing, right? Context and influence. So this reflects against the chaos of the 17th century, civil war. And so what happened? Why did he write this? So this work was written because this reflects reaction against the chaos of the 17th century, civil war, execution of Charles I, instability, execution of Oliver Cromwell. Itna zyada tha that, writers were like, we need to bring some order. And this is the reason that this religious kind of a writer came, John Bunyan, who started working on being more moralistic. And he restored certainty. Iske works ne Pilgrim Progress ne certainty laya, stability laya through religious conviction, because his works were completely religious. Like the medieval play Every Man जो हमने पढ़ा था, this also talks about the allegorical, जहाँ पे vices या virtues अपने character के form में आके बता रहे हैं. The journey of Christian. Now this is Pilgrim Progress में Pilgrim कौन है? The Christ का नाम ही the Christian है. Okay, so Christian उसका नाम ही Christian है. As I told you, it's an allegory. So the Pilgrim कौन है? Christian है. He begins. Pilgrims अपना जर्नी बिगिन करता है पिलग्रिम प्रोग्रेस में. पिलग्रिम अपना जर्नी जो क्रिश्चियन है बिगिन करता है इन द सिटी ऑफ डिस्ट्रक्शन, सिंफुल वर्ल्ड. सिटी ऑफ डिस्ट्रक्शन मतलब इट्स अ सिंफुल वर्ल्ड. एंड व्हाट डज ही एनकाउंटर? He encounters, he goes through a series of difficult challenges. Okay, so that is slough of despond, valley of the shadow of death, vanity fair, worldly temptations, doubting caste, self-doubt ruled by giant despair. And his wife and children later undertake the same pilgrimage led by great heart. Okay, so this is a very silly example that I'm going to give you right now. किसी ने वो देखी हातिम ताई जितेंद्र की मूवी, बहुत पुरानी, उसमें भी ना he has to go through a lot of challenges. So Pilgrim Progress was something like that. Okay, that he has to go through a series of challenges wherein he is moving and you're taking up every challenge which was very religious based. Okay, then moving ahead, you have, and that is great heart versus giant despair, a defining moment. तो एक fight होती है great heart की and giant despair. Okay, over here look at this. So what happens here, that great heart, a guide for Christian's family. So great heart जो है वो Christian उसकी family को guide कर रहा है कि आपको यहाँ पे जाना है. He slays giant despair and destroys doubting castle. And he represents, so ये किसको destroy कर रहा है, इसको destroy कर रहा है और इस castle को destroy कर रहा है. Okay, so he represents triumph over hopelessness and uncertainty. Despair को kill कर रहा है, hopelessness को kill कर रहा है. So what is he triumphing? Hopelessness and uncertainty. Giant despair was brought down but was very loth to die. Great heart was his death, for he severed his head from his shoulders. Okay, so these are the lines from Pilgrim Progress. Then you have the Pilgrim Progress and the English language. Now it's simple, vivid language. जो simple language use की थी इसमें very simple ताकि लोग normally पढ़ पाएं, आम आदमी पढ़ पाए. So this was there, and along with the Book of Common Prayer and the King James Bible 1611, it helped shape modern English. Now this is an important point कि इसमें जो English use हुई है, it helped to shape the modern English. Jonathan Swift, author of Gulliver's Travel, confirmed that yes, its influence on everyday speech. John Bunyan का और कौन सा work था? Grace Abounding 1666, Spiritual Autobiography, and the Life and Death of Mr. Badman 1680, another moral allegory. Okay, so yes, he was writing a lot of allegories. All right, then guys, the last work, Significance, a work of true popular literature. So yes, accessible to ordinary people. So why was John Bunyan so popular? Because he was accessible to ordinary people. People could have read it. It was very popular literature, deeply religious, yet widely influential beyond Puritan circles. So yes, it was very influential, religious, very didactic, very moralistic, and this contrasts sharply with the refined Augustan literature of the time. So ये excuse me, ये जो ऑगस्टन लिटरेचर था, वेरी रिफाइंड, इन डेकोरम, हर चीज़ में ऑर्डर, हर चीज़ में एकदम टू द पॉइंट था. इट वाज वेरी डिफरेंट. व्हाई? बिकॉज ये एक ऑर्डिनरी लैंग्वेज में यूज़ करता है, ये कोई बहुत ही ज़्यादा बहुत ही हाई फ्लोइंग वर्ड्स में यूज़ नहीं कर रहा था. सो दिस इज़ द रीज़न दैट दिस बिकम्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट वन. सो गाइज, विद दिस आई एम कमिंग टू एन एंड विद माई part 1 of the restoration to Romanticism era. Tomorrow we will be going ahead in future, wherever my next class will be. I will be talking about more aspects, and we will be looking at how the entire socio-political conditions, the cultural aspects, the literary aspect, everything changed during that period. So on that note, I'll end my class, and I hope to see students who are opting for English literature in my classes, because we are doing a very, very thorough study of the entire syllabus, and every text we are dealing in great detail with a lot of questions and answers as well. We'll be practicing writing